worldwide.
Resident Evil Village. I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna go ahead and safely say that I think Resident Evil Village is probably the most overhyped game that we've seen in recent history. And you know what that means. When you overhype something so much, people are bound to be disappointed. So I'm here today to explain why Resident Evil Village sucks. Now, before I get started, I'm just going to preemptively say, don't come jumping down my throat. I enjoyed Resident Evil Village when it first came out. I played through it a few times, I played it on the harder difficulties, and I put some solid time into it, and that time was not bad. But when I say it sucks, what I mean is it should have been so much more. Now, when it comes to the hype, I don't think anybody can argue that Capcom hyped the shit out of Village like nothing we have ever seen before. You could not turn your head without hearing about how fucking awesome Village was going to be, how it was dark and atmospheric. It was like a fusion of RE4 and RE7, everything you love. There's going to be castles, vampires, big titties, and all kinds of good shit, so you better fucking pay attention, and you better hit that pre-order button. So we did, and we were fucking hype. Every showcase that Capcom came out with about Resident Evil Village, we saw just a little bit more. We got the Maiden demo, we got the Castle demo, and the Village demo, and all of them were just enough to whet our beaks, to get us so in the mood for what was to come. Capcom knew exactly what they were doing. They put just enough gameplay, just enough story elements to keep us hooked and wanting more. Every time we heard the devs speak, it was exactly what we wanted to hear. It's a balance of combat, exploration, and puzzle solving. It brings the essence of RE4, while RE7 functions as the base for the game. A horror movie you can play. A theme park of horror. We want to create unique situations, characters that would create fear in new ways. Each of the lords is a different horror trope. We got vampires, dolls, fish, whatever the fuck Heisenberg is. It's all there, baby, and it's glorious. Now, I'm not saying that all that was a lie. I'm just saying. You guys know what snake oil is? It's 16 feet tall with gigantic boobs and a hat. So again, not really a lie, but that's what I'll call a masterful untruth. All kidding aside, Lady D, or rather the lack of Lady D, isn't my main problem. What I really have the biggest problem with, more than anything else, was the gameplay itself. It's like a hybrid of RE7 and RE4. It took everything fans loved about RE7, the atmosphere, the mood, the, survival horror, and just fucking threw that away. Instead, they kept the actiony holdovers from RE6 and merged them with superficial RE4-isms that fans were meant to recognize, such as the attaché case and the inclusion of a merchant. Now, these things on their own might not seem like that big a deal, but they're pretty much a microcosm of the wool that Capcom's effectively trying to pull over our eyes. They're trying to sell us the legacy of the Resident Evil franchise, as opposed to putting in the effort to make what was supposed to be a groundbreaking game. I mean, either that or Capcom has completely missed what it is that fans actually like about Resident Evil. They are committed to this action panic hybrid horror thing that, quite frankly, I don't think anyone really enjoys. They just kind of put up with, because that's like what they're getting over and over again. And someone up there at the top's just like, put in the fucking guns. Kids love to shoot shit. Pump up Chris's muscles. You gotta make the muscles bigger. That's how we make the fucking money. And you know what? They're probably right, because we keep letting it happen. We keep buying it over and over again, even though we die inside just a little bit more every entry that comes out. Now, it might sound like I'm exaggerating, but really think about it. In 5 years, do you think anyone's gonna look back and be like, Resident Evil Village? The defining game of the generation. Loved every minute of it. It was magic. Of course not. Then ask yourself, would I even care about this game if it didn't have the Resident Evil name? I don't think so. Now, I think that's a pretty good measuring stick as to whether a game is quote-unquote good, when you can ask yourself, if this wasn't X franchise, would I really be playing it, and would I really be enjoying it? Now, when it comes to the writing in Village, I think even die-hard fans of this game can probably admit, oh, it's not so good. Not so good. Especially when you compare it to its contemporaries. It falls short. We're in an age where writing in video games is approaching and even transcending what we see in movies and books. We have games like Ghost of Tsushima, Control, Sekiro, and Returnal. When's the last time you can think of where a Capcom story blew you away? Don't worry, I'll wait. Was it Resident Evil 2 Remake? Well, sorry about your luck, that was written in the 90s. Now, it's not to say a game needs amazing writing in order to be good. That's kind of the unique thing about video games. You play them. But if that's going to be the case, the gameplay better be something special. If the gameplay itself is mediocre, well then, there you have it. The gameplay itself is mediocre. I don't know. Maybe I'm alone on this one, but it's kind of hard not to be disappointed when you look at Capcom. They pioneered the genre. But in order to stay relevant, you kind of gotta strive to improve. Capcom is acting like we should just grandfather them in because, you know, they made great games in the past. We should all just love it because it's Resident Evil. Now, in case all this is too vague for you guys, let's kind of break down the story that we got. Starting with Lady D, she's pretty promising. In fact, they knew exactly what they were doing using her in all the promos. The problem, however, is when you actually play the game, the castle's kind of over before it begins. In fact, all the areas are, but we'll get more on that later. Anyway, it's hard to even really talk about the story in the castle because the whole thing's over in 30 minutes. I distinctly remember playing the castle demo and I was like, whoa, this is awesome. I cannot wait to get some of this backstory. But no. That was it. That was the castle. There's so many cool set pieces. We got the roof, the distillery, the dungeon, all that good shit. But we spend so little time in it. It's more like we're taking a tour of the castle than actually exploring it. Honestly, I felt like I was part of a tour group. Like, ooh, cool, what's going on over there? No, sorry, sir. You have to leave. The next group's on the way in. Oh, okay, I guess. Maybe the next house will be better, though. Oh, honey, no. We have such sights to show you. Now, I actually really liked House Beneviento. However, once again, it was over too soon, and it's hard not to be upset when you can see how much missed potential there was. Quite frankly, I think the entire game should have just been focusing on Beneviento. There's already strange amounts of overlap between her and Miranda with the loss of a family member, so I don't really understand why they added another character that was so similar, except for the fact that they had all these super cool ideas that they wanted to put into one game. But that being said, I think the whole village could have, you know, been under her control, all misty, due to the flowers and the mold and all that good shit. It seems like that would have been a better and, quite frankly, more horrifying setting than we got. Although, I'll not lie, the fucking fetus of God made me Hershey squirt in my pants. So, well done whoever came up with that one. Next, we move over to House Moreau, and I mean, blah. Just blah. As much as I actually kind of like Moreau as a character, he's so generic and so stock, and we've just seen it 1,000 times, that, like, I don't even really care. Not to mention that he, again, doesn't really fit into the rest of the story. Like, okay, maybe I didn't read enough of the notes, even though I read them all, but what the fuck does the Kadu even do? Like, it doesn't make any sense. How come one person becomes a vampire and then someone else is fucking Magneto? I don't understand. Why is that how the mold works? Whatever. Don't think about it. Just be spooked. Just be spooked because it's spooky. Spooky dooky. Now that leads me to Heisenberg. And Heisenberg's my favorite. Not because he's cool, not because he's a good character, but because he's so stupid. Somebody at Capcom really overestimated the cool factor. Because every single time he's on screen, it's just cringe. Everything he says is so cringy. And even the way he speaks is just blah. This is blah. And I know the voice actor can do good work because it's the same voice actor that voiced Nikolai in Resident Evil Resistance, and he did an awesome job there. So I'm going to chalk it up to the direction. But I don't know, maybe it's just me. I think they give the absolute worst character the most screen time, which doesn't make any sense. Not to mention the factory part of the game is by far the worst area, and once again it goes on the absolute longest. It's almost like all the other areas were cannibalized to make the factory longer, and I don't know why that was the way that they wanted to go, because quite frankly, every single second of the factory I just wanted to get out of it. But then when I finally get my wish, in order to leave I have to do this Mobile Suit Gundam battle, and that's very Resident Evil, by the way. Nothing screams Resident Evil like sitting in a mecha taking down Metal Gear. Now lastly, I want to talk a little bit about pacing, or rather the length of the game. Now a lot of people were complaining that the game was only 8 hours long. And at first I was like, you know what guys, classic REs were much shorter, so like maybe fuck off. But then I started thinking about it just a little bit, and I think I know why people were so upset. Yes, 8 hours is longer than the old classic games, and remember, length doesn't equal good. Just take a look at my good friend Resident Evil 6. But that being said, we are in 2021, and 8 hours isn't really the standard anymore. And if you really think about it, even if it were, are you really mad that it was 8 hours? Or are you mad that those 8 hours didn't live up to your expectations? If you really enjoy a game, you really enjoy the gameplay, the story, you don't stop and say, wow, only 8 hours? I expected more. What you do is stop and say, I wish there was more. And that's a very important distinction to make. People thought 8 hours wasn't enough because the story wasn't done, or at the very least, it wasn't fleshed out like it should have been. But out of the way, story. If you're worried about something that's not fleshed out and should have been more, let's talk just a little bit about the mercenaries. Now, I don't want to go too much into it because after all, it is a bonus mode, so it's just gravy. But I think it's pretty obvious that it was a letdown to everybody. Not only is it short, tooth-grindingly annoying and unfun, but you only get to play as Ethan. The fun of the mercenaries was using our favorite characters' different loadouts to uniquely navigate through the challenges. It is, after all, called the Mercenaries, not the Mercenary. Give me one good reason why you couldn't even play as Chris. Never mind, I'll give you a good reason. It's because Capcom truly didn't understand why people liked the Mercenaries, and it's painfully obvious that they just tacked this mode on and called it the Mercenaries in order to generate hype, because that's all they were doing. Now, once again, gameplay is what really matters. So, if it's fun and challenging, one could forgive the lack of content. But ask yourself this. When you finally got triple S on Factory 2, did you say, great, I can't wait to do that again and try to beat my score? Or did you say, fuck, finally, now I never have to fucking do that shit ever again? I rest my case. So, at the end of it all, I know I'm coming off like I absolutely hate this game, and I don't really. It's not all bad. There are good and fun aspects to Resident Evil Village. I enjoyed my initial playthrough, and enjoyed going through again on the Village of Shadows difficulty. Even though just adding health to enemies isn't exactly the way to increase difficulty, but whatever. It's not a bad game, but it's underwhelming to say the least. This is what we call an ungraceful sequel. Quite frankly, I don't think it was possible for any product to live up to the hype Capcom generated. And they used that hype to play with our expectations and give us something that just wasn't up to snuff. And let me tell you, in a world of Cyberpunk 2077, you can't do that shit anymore. We will notice. But I think once the initial buzz wears off, people start looking at Resident Evil Village with a more critical eye, and they'll realize why it was such a disappointment. Well, that was a mouthful, and I'm sorry I ran a little bit long, but with the amount of hours that I put into Village, I think I was more than fair, but I just want to get a little bit personal before I go. I bought Resident Evil 4 4 times. I bought Remake 3 times. I bought RE2, RE5, and 6 twice, just to support what was my favorite franchise. But first you give us RE3R, and now this? Like, you're out of fucking touch, old man. You have no idea what people want anymore. Either you're unwilling or you're unable to listen. And quite frankly, I feel like a goddamn battered housewife. I just keep making excuses like, oh, it wasn't that bad. This or that. It's a good part of, X game. You'll do better next time. You used to treat me so nice. Well, you know what? I think it's time for a fucking divorce. And maybe in a few years or a few remakes, I'll let you see the kids. But until that time, don't call me. So whether you guys agree or disagree, doesn't really matter to me as long as you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know down below, as well as what you guys think of Village, and what game you want to see next on Why Does It Suck. And as always, I'm TG. If you like what you saw, you know what to do.